Alright, so I'm back here. I got those bolts all snugged up. So the torque spec on these, this top bolt is 16 foot-pounds. The one on the bottom is 33 foot-pounds. I just got it real snugged up by feel. Just doing this over time, just get an idea of what those values kind of feel like. So I did put a torque wrench on here. All I can find real quick, readily available, is my 1/4 inch drive torque wrench. So I did a conversion. The 16 foot-pounds comes out to 192 inch-pounds. So I set that on there, and then I feel like it's going to be already more than that. So I'm going to go ahead and just use this if you're just trying to be precise. Show you an example. Go ahead and, so we got a click there, so it's already didn't even move, so it's already over that threshold, which I figured. So we're good and plenty tight there. Now we'll go ahead and finish putting everything else back together here. Alright, so I'm back here. What I did is I went ahead and routed my belt around my pulleys, make sure it's around all my pulleys. You want to make sure it's on your idler pulley and your belt tensioner, and then right now it's just really loose on the alternator pulley. So when you come up here on the power steering pump, you see the belt sitting right here. So what we want to do is release that tensioner to allow slack in that belt to pull it up over this power steering pump pulley. This belt tensioner is really stiff, and I got my long 3/8 ratchet on here. It's a 19mm socket down here on this little stub that looks like a head of a bolt, but it's not really a bolt. It's just made onto the bracket on the belt tensioner. So I didn't show that in the last video of removing the belt. It is a pain. It's hard to do. I can't do it while I'm filming because it requires so much effort to push this thing, and I have to rig this up with a wrench. Let me grab my wrench. Well, I don't have a wrench here. But I put a 19mm wrench on the end of my ratchet handle here, up here at the top, and I use that to give me extra leverage to put this belt tensioner, to release the tensioner to get the belt on. If you didn't see the previous video, go back and see that. That's the process in removing this alternator and testing for the battery light to figure out, why that battery light was coming on, which was in this case the alternator. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab my wrench so I can show you what I was talking about with that leverage. Alright, so I got my wrench on here on the end of my ratchet. Let you see that there, what it looks like. So I'm gonna use this as extra leverage to pull it and push that belt tensioner. I am gonna need both hands to pull on this belt to get that back on that pulley. So I'm gonna put it on pause to do that real quick. Alright, so I'm back after fighting with this belt. I got it on finally. Got it on the pulley up here. You just want to double check it and make sure it's around all the pulleys good, and it's on the center of the belt tensioner, because the smooth part rides on that. You just want to make sure because there's no grooves, you want to make sure it's centered on there. And then make sure you're down on your AC compressor and your crankshaft pulley down there. Once you determine all that is good, then you can remove this ratchet. I recommend using a long pry bar, probably over 20 inches long. I didn't have one here with me when I did this job, or I would have used that. I do have one at my other shop, but I just didn't even bother take the time to go get it. Just fought this here with this setup. So next I'm gonna put the fan back in. Gonna stick that down in here, and then bolt this wire harness up to the alternator. So I'm gonna pull this off here and see if you can see that where this ratchet goes for the belt tensioner. See if I can get a good angle here. As good as it's going to get in there. pinch it off. Alright, so now you can see right down in there, you can see where that 19 millimeter socket goes around down there, right above the belt on that lower section of it. That's where you put your 19 millimeter socket. Use a long breaker bar so you can get a lot of leverage on that to release that tension. Alright, so I'm going to put on pause here and get everything situated to start putting this fan in. Alright, so I'm back with my fan here. What you want to do is you want to put this with the blade side facing the radiator. I got 2 little bolts down here. I'll show you those. I got one that's barely started down there, and on this side I got another one. There's 2 notches in this fan shroud that's going to slide right on those bolts. I'll show you here in a second what I'm talking about on that. So you got these notches here. You got one here, one on this side, and we're going to just slide that down in there nice and easy and line it up on those bolts. And we're going to need my other hand here, so I'm going to pause it. Alright, so I got the fan down in there, got it on those bottom bolts, so I'm going to go ahead and put these lines right up here with these top ones. There's one here, and there's one right over this right here. So I'm going to go ahead and start these bolts. Alright, so I got these bolts started. I got one here, it's a little 10 millimeter. I got one over here, it's another 10 millimeter. So I'm going to go ahead and snug these up. Just get them a little snug, nothing too crazy. Alright, so next step would be to hook this harness up down here back to the fan. So I gotta go underneath, run that back up, put it on the little bracket down in there. This little bracket sticking out between those 2 fan shrouds. You can see it sticking out. I gotta connect the connector back to that, and then there's another little prong right there sticking out down on there, that valley. That's where the connector goes. The harness actually goes on the one down in there. So I'm going to connect those and then show you what that looks like. Alright, so I'm back now. This is what your final connection looks like. The top part of this connector that comes from the fan itself snaps into that top bracket there. And then the connector underneath the bottom snaps into that connector. There's a little tab on there that snaps on there. You want to make sure both of those make a click sound when you press them together, so everything's good, tight, secure, and snug. And then below that, down there in the further down, you can see the little clip sticking through for the wire harness. It goes through there. Now the next step would be, also I did while it was down underneath messing with that connector and harness, I did go ahead and tighten the 2 lower fan shroud bolts. So now the next step here would be to put my harness on the alternator here. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll be about done with this. Alright, so you got this harness here, this goes into the back of the alternator. This plug here, this one is going to snap into have to look and see. It's going to probably be on the back of the alternator as well. And then this bottom one's going to go down to your AC compressor into the coil connector. Powers your AC coil. So I'm going to go ahead and do that because I'm going to need both hands. That one, tiny one, is way down right in there. You see the black connector sticking out. That's going to go down in there. And that little hole right there in the back is to the bottom on that. See if I can get something to. There we go. So this little hole is where that little tab is going to go on the harness here for this little guy. It's going to snap in that hole there, and then this connector is going to go way down in here. And like I said, that hole right there is where that harness is going to snap into, and that other larger plug is going to go right in there. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Alright, so I got that lowered AC compressor connector in. That's the blue one down there at the bottom. And then you want to start from the bottom and work your way up to the top on this. And then coming up and put that harness connector right in there in the back of the alternator. Let's see if I can get a better angle. There we go. Got that in there. Now next we're going to put that large connector into the back of that tan connector right here. It's just sitting there to the left of it. We're going to snap that in now, and then come up here and make this connection up here on top. So I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick. I got this large connector in the alternator. This one has a rubber boot on the end of the harness as well that you got to feed over top of that connector. One thing I did want to point out is these connectors only go on one way. Make sure, just look at the ends of them and orient them to where they will actually go together, and then push them till they make a little click. So now I just want to feed this rubber boot on. Let's see if I can do this. It's dark out here and this light is not the best light. Let's see. Gotta lose my light angle. Alright. Just want to slide that rubber boot on just like that there. Make sure it's on there snug. Now we're going to come up here and connect the main battery cable to the alternator. This has a little tab on the end right here. Hold this boot back where it sticks out on the end. There's a notch right down in here. Get my finger out of the way. It sits right in there like that. That's how you want to put that down in there. And then feed your nut on top of it. Sit down like that. Alright, so I got the nut in there. I'm going to go ahead and put my 12mm socket and extension and tighten that down. You just want to snug it down. You don't want to over tighten that. I gotta pull this boot back to get it out of the way and get it in there. It naturally wants to fall down over there. So you just snug that up. And grab my ratchet. I just want to use like a small 1/4-inch ratchet on this. You don't need a lot of leverage. Just snug it up until it stops. You can go like just a tad bit more. You definitely don't want it coming loose, but you don't want it too tight because you'll snap it. Alright, so that's good. Now you got to put the boot over top of it to protect it from any electrical sparks, because that is coming off your battery cable directly. We're gonna have to fight this thing and open it up. Alright, give it a little twist back and forth, make sure it's, pull it up and down a little bit, make sure it's all sealed. Got that on there. Tilt the light up here and get a better angle. Well, ain't much better, it's blinding. Alright, so now we got to get this bolt here attached to the alternator bracket, that little hole right there. We got this little tiny bolt here. It's going to go in there. Push that down to line up with it. Get that in there. That's going to be a 10 millimeter. Same thing here, just snug it up. You don't want it too crazy tight, it's just plastic. Basically till it bottoms out and just a tad bit more. Alright, so the next thing we got to do is put the coolant bottle back in here, which goes on this bracket right here. It's sticking up. See the two slots where it's going to slide down in. Let me see if I can show you a picture of that. You got the coolant bottle. This is going to slide down into that bracket like so. Sometimes I can't see. Alright, so that's in there. Just want to give it a little wiggle and make sure it's in there. It's in there pretty good. Put this hose back in here. Tighten this cap back down. So we're all snug. Make sure connections are good. Radiator cap's tight. And oh yeah, I disconnected these, which I didn't really need to. This was the first time doing this job on this car. I've never done one on this particular vehicle before. So it was a little bit of a learning curve, but just make that snap in and come up here and snap this one back in. Here's those little clicks. Those are good. Coils are in there good still. Alright, so that's pretty much it. The only thing left to do is put this engine cover back on. Just two little plastic screws. And then reconnect your battery here. So I'm going to pause and get the engine cover. Alright, so I'm back here to put this engine cover on. I got it sitting up right up here. Just going to flip this over. You just want to line this hole here with that one. Over here on this side, you're going to do the same thing. It's kind of dark there, but line that one up with that one. Make sure it fits over your oil filler cap. be a pain because you can't see it. There it goes. Snug it down. Alright, so we got something not sitting flush here. Alright. So there's that. Got it nice and snug. Make sure it's tight here. Make sure the oil cap's tight. So now we're all good to go. All we got to do now is connect the battery. Alright, so I did want to go over the tools that I used for this job. I got a 10mm wrench to get that lower fan shroud bolt on the bottom. Can't really get a ratchet in there. It's a real tight fit. It's on the driver's side. I got the 19mm wrench, which I use just for leverage on my longest 3/8 drive ratchet that I have here. I would recommend getting a longer one, or even a 1/2 inch. I got my 1/2 inch, another 3/8 ratchet, and a 1/4 inch ratchet, a couple extensions, 14mm socket, screwdriver for the engine cover. I got my magnetic pickup tool, pick up any tools or bolts you drop, and just a standard basic Craftsman tool set here. And then this one, I had a reducer from the 1/2 inch drive to the 3/8 to give me that just right length I needed to get that lower alternator bolt started. So now it's just going to come back up and put the battery together. So start with a positive. Light is not the best light to be using for this. So I'm going to put my positive on, wiggle it down, make sure it's on there good. Pause and grab my tools. Alright, grab my 10mm 1/4 inch. Went ahead and snugged down the positive. You don't want to over tighten that, just get it nice and snug till it don't move. Snap your cover back on. Now you want to come over to your negative and hook that up. It's going to spark a little bit. Alright, so got that on there. We're going to make sure it's down, positioned nice. I'm going to snug that one up as well. Just want it good and snug, not over tight, damage the terminal ends. So that's it, we're done with the alternator install. It's not the easiest one I've ever done. It's not the hardest I've done. It should take about an hour to do it. First time doing it for me, took me about 2 hours. And that's why I'm going over this video step by step, taking the time for that without doing that or any of the talking and just jumping into it. Even being the first time, should have been able to do it in about an hour. But I have done many alternators before, just not on this type of vehicle. Let's see. So in the beginning of the last video, I did test the battery. One thing I forgot to mention, you take your voltmeter, put it on volts, direct current. Can't get that positive in there. It's easier to start with a negative. It sits in there good. So with that, I have 11.93 volts. So this is a brand new battery. It's only like a week old, but it is drained down. This should be about 12.5, 12.6 volts for a fully charged battery. But however, when I crank it, previously with the old alternator, this actually dropped to like 11.4 voltage because the lights all came on and everything. So the alternator was not charging at all, putting out any output. So now when I crank this thing, come back and test it, we should see 13, 14 volts. So let's see if I can get this in there to stay in there. There we go. Clean my screen off. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and crank it and see what we get. Alright, so I'm back. I got this thing fired up. One thing you want to do is make sure your belt, everything's good. Make sure it's on all your pulleys. Make sure it's going, didn't fly off or anything crazy. Make sure nothing's rubbing. Everything is good. So now when we go over here and test this, you'll see now we got 13.65 volts, which is right where you want to be. So now you know it's actually charging this battery and the alternator's doing its job. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope it helps somebody out there. If you want to see how to remove this alternator, go back to the previous video. I'll show you how to do that. Alright, thank everybody for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.